Life comes in many shapes and sizes. It consists of various thrilling surprises, but it also contains mundane and monotonous moments that everybody experiences daily. Whether it is work, school, or anything alike, there will be times where you may feel that you're fed up with life and just seek something earnest. Perhaps it is self-discovery, romance, maybe even pursuing your dreams. The possibilities are endless. This is the story of Call of the Night, an exploration of what it means to be alive and the many different elements of life itself. It is a tale of these characters, vampire or human, and their answers to many of the questions they undergo in their lives regardless of who they are. A desperate struggle to latch on to long-lost fame by creating fake villains, an obsession with revenge causing one to lose all sense of life, a century-long journey to discover love, and most importantly, the desire to escape the normal and pursue a dream in Ko Yamori. He represents everything Call of the Night tries to convey, and this is highlighted with every single character. All their arcs are utilized in ways to further showcase Ko different answers to the difficult questions that he's faced with, as it all ties to the story's most important themes, embracing one's identity, love, and the beauty of life itself. This can be seen vividly in characters such as Kiku Hoshimi, Mahiru Seki, and Anko Uguisu, which we'll be discussing in the video. These characters serve to further give Ko many different perspectives and lead him into an answer of his own volition. This is all possible thanks to the Night, the place that welcomes all that are interested in taking a break from their everyday life in boundless ways. This is a coming-of-age story of a middle schooler who learns the importance of breaking free from societal norms and truly embraces himself as Ko Yamori, regardless of whether or not he is vampire or human. It is no coincidence that he later becomes the first and only character in the series to become a vampire-human hybrid, symbolizing him as the bridge between the two species. They both experience life in similar ways besides vampires' supernatural abilities. They're all equipped with different thoughts, feelings, and problems that humans experience in day-to-day life. We'll be discussing the manga in its entirety, so be wary of spoilers.
人はなぜ夜更かしをすると思う？見たい番組がある？やりたいことがある？明日への不安？それらはすべて一つの原因に収束する。今日という日に満足していないからだ。
Individuality is one of the core components that makes this story special. It is what makes every person in this world unique in their own right. Ko Yamori is a representative of this theme in its entirety, given his tendency to stick to societal norms and simply follow the crowd, playing a persona that has led him to become so aimless and detached to the point where he only does what is right due to his obliviousness to any other means of life. Him simply indulging in the night in this fashion is already a retaliation against normalcy. Ultimately, it is a time in which people are supposed to be sleeping. The story is constantly questioning Ko's methods of acquiring an exciting life. When analyzing the way Ko describes his goal, it is quite clear that he is utilizing love as a vehicle for that objective. He is going about it in a disconnected way. It stresses on his lack of empathy towards emotions, as it is what led him to this very moment in the first place. He could not comprehend the meaning behind Sakura's confession and simply brushed it off. But perhaps, if things don't work out as intended, he could easily go right back into his old routine and pretend nothing happened. He has that luxury. It is an important facet of his character, the fact that he can simply just go back to how things were. It may be the correct thing to do both as a student and as a human, but is this what Ko Yamori desires? There is a lot to discuss when it comes to the person known as Ko Yamori, as the narrative is constantly pitting him against various characters that result in his fundamental principles being challenged. In spite of how he presents himself, he is quite authentic and emotional, never wavering in front of trouble nor sugarcoating his opinions when something isn't right in his book. This is shown in his encounter with Seri Kikiyo. He is not one to overlook murder just out of frustration, and even goes as far as to defend Akun from Seri's onslaught. A big portion of his character arc is realizing how human he has been this entire time despite what he thinks. It's an ironic story about a human who gradually learns of his humanity through his goal of escaping it. However, it is important to note that his actions are not derived out of self-righteousness. He does not act in accordance to justice, rather his own personal beliefs on what he thinks is ethical. In his case, it is the people he cares for. If it isn't within his vision, then he will likely not be concerned with it. Through these moments such as lecturing Seri, saving Akun, and many more, they further highlight Ko's capability for emotions and sincerity. He isn't adhering to society in these instances, because that isn't what the night is about. The night is for embracing who you truly are. These moments are Ko Yamori. Most people would look the other way if they come across a stranger in trouble. Hell, some may not even bother helping friends who are in danger. But this isn't who Ko Yamori is. It is supported even further in his scenes with Kiyosumi Shirakawa. His moments with her highlight two vital details about his character: his naive and compassionate nature. They are both peas in a pod, doing whatever they can to find solace in their unsatisfactory lives. Moreover, I think the fact that Kiyosumi has accepted her miserable life and simply seeks relaxation to ease that pain in comparison to Ko, who yearns to reject that mundanity by searching for exhilaration, says a lot about the two characters. It highlights the harsh reality of this world, one that is unfair to adults and prevents them from attempting to run away when things are rough. It is something that Ko does not comprehend given his naivete. She can't just embrace the night and abandon her work. And that's simply because she's an adult. Ko's inability to salvage her situation is effective to communicate that point. He is ignorant to the world of adults and its structure.
俺、吸血鬼になりたいんだ。
は？
ナズナちゃんは吸血鬼。俺はこの人に吸血鬼にしてもらおうと思ってる。少なくとも人間じゃないのはわかるでしょ。言われた通り、俺は子供で会社のことも社会のこともわからない。甘い考えで生きてるんだと思う。
Not to mention, this does also establish another important detail. Not everything about Ko's goal in becoming a vampire is flawed. There is a lot more to it than just that. It is that motive of his that managed to help somebody suffering through toxicity in the first place, and those answers lie in his interactions with the residents of the night, each layer showing what makes the night so mesmerizing. It is this scene that stresses on the narrative's dedication to explore these topics wholeheartedly. It tells the viewer that it intends to pursue it in an in-depth manner. Otherwise, Ko would have fixed Kiyosumi's situation, but that would go against what the encounter was trying to establish. Nevertheless, this is not to insinuate that he utterly failed in assisting her. She found relief in simply knowing that somebody out there is willing to help her despite their absurd dreams. A crucial character for Ko's story is Akira Asai, his childhood friend. She acts as the character to be supportive of Ko's growth despite its questionable nature. As long as Ko is not aimless, then all should be well to her. In addition, her character functions as a foil to Ko, especially when considering the distinctions in their similarities. She has essentially succumbed herself to the exact thing Ko is avoiding by becoming a vampire, adhering to routines and normalcy. However, this is not to say that Akira lacks individuality, as she possesses various characteristics that would be deemed abnormal, such as her willingness to support Ko in his dubious goals and accepting him regardless of what he may eventually become. It is a trait that both she and Ko share, as many individuals would flinch at the thought, terrified of being near the incomprehensible. A key difference between the two characters is her responsibility. She cannot let go of her duties and pursue freedom in the way Ko does. It's why she tries persuading him to return to school, but not forcefully. Her character arc serves two important details narratively, emphasizing on the importance of supporting your loved ones and assisting them towards a path you believe is the suitable one, and showcasing how Ko may have ended up if he had never decided to free himself from his sorrowful routine. But she is simply set on seeing this mundane facade of hers to the very end, even if she clearly wanted a way out of this loneliness. Unlike Ko, she understands feelings as seen in how horrible she feels after what had occurred with Sakura. She realizes how terrible it must have been for her curiosity to cause both Ko and Sakura to feel hurt, completely opposing Ko's obliviousness to the entire situation at hand. Additionally, she acts as the bridge between Ko and Mahiru during the Kiku Hoshimi arc, and it's where more of her identity shines through. Only the person known as Akira Asai would have been able to make this possible. These two are essentially brothers to her, and she just wants all three of them to go back to what they once were. She was the anchor Ko needed to find his own footing in the finale, but it results in a bittersweet conclusion for her character. She is essentially one of the only characters in Call of the Night to not seek self-discovery herself, but assists others in doing so, and it couldn't be more perfect for her character that is self-sacrificial in nature. She was capable of letting go somebody that she considered family for his own sake, and something about that is wonderfully melancholic. She is sincere, emotional, and does whatever she can to help the people close to her despite her lack of strength in comparison to many of the characters in the story. She is the anchor to the overarching developments for both of the protagonists. Her story is unique because she establishes an essential message within the theme of individuality. It isn't synonymous with abnormality. Individualism isn't about how different or normal you are. It is all about having different thoughts, feelings, and emotions that you can call your own. Ones that aren't formed purely by the masses, and Akira is a character that embodies both normalcy while also containing various traits that one may deem to be abnormal. Mahiru is another character used to emphasize Ko's facade. After all, he is the person Ko idolizes and has been copying this entire time. Like Ko, Mahiru puts on a facade of extrovertedness which draws people towards them, but it is all superficial except for the two individuals he cherishes, Akira and Ko. They make him feel at ease, and were essentially the only people he wanted to make memories with before he commenced with his plan with Kikuhoshimi that we'll be discussing in the next section of this video. Ironically, Ko had been perceiving Mahiru in ways Ko detests the most, robbing oneself of their identity and simply labeling them superficially. He could not fathom that Mahiru was just like him. Instead, he deduces that Mahiru is flawless and the role model that he sought to become, the perfect student that everybody adores and has never faced an issue in his life.
僕から見て、いや、誰から見てもそうだと思う。そうに違いない。真昼くんは完璧だった。成績は優秀。スポーツも得意。人前に立つこともためらわない。教師からの信頼も厚く、かといって真面目すぎない。極めつけは家が花屋だ。要素が素敵すぎる。真昼くんを悪く言えるやつなんかいないだろう。そんな彼に友達だなんて言われたら、めっちゃ嬉しいのだ。
In actuality, he is riddled with flaws stemming from his household, as well as having his entire identity ripped away from him due to his brother's death. He had to play the character akin to Shogo, or else he would have been completely left behind. He did everything in his power to one-up Ko, and it is all because of his loneliness. He despises it and is likely desperate for the attention that he has never received from his family. They've both always been playing superficial personas, but it was only Ko who managed to be content with the aftermath of that facade. He actually enjoyed being the independent loner even during middle school. Ko was simply fed up with having to play this character and longed for something profound. The most important detail between the two of them is that Ko had the choice, Mahiru didn't. Kiku was his only means of potentially escaping his miserable life, as opposed to Ko's realization that his school life was no longer as terrible as it once was. And this is highlighted in the class trip, which is essentially the final hurdle that truly challenges Ko's determination on his newfound identity. It is when he finally manages to befriend the people who once led him to ditch school, and most importantly face Sakura Asakura herself, the trigger that caused him to drop out of school in the first place. He finally drops that persona and presents his real self to her, and it is only there where he manages to befriend her alongside her two best friends, Saki and Michiko. While he holds that persona with strangers, it is no longer as stressful as it once was. His facade was derived from Mahiru, who derived it from his brother. Ko had been viewing Mahiru as nothing but a trait, thereby not looking at Mahiru Seki the person, rather the image he presented. Furthermore, Mahiru's obsession with defeating Ko stems from all of this. He doesn't have what Ko has, except for the fact that he has fallen in love. He thought he would have been the first to become a vampire, and once he realized that Ko is already on his way to becoming one, thanks to his current state, he loses his mind. He cannot handle being humiliated by Ko, because he feels deeply inferior to him in every single way. He doesn't want to lose the one person who managed to embrace the lifestyle that he couldn't stand. Ko was the only person who he truly wanted to be around. He was the one who managed to push Mahiru to try living for himself and pursue a path that he could call his own. It is quite funny. Ko was the one who was capable of giving Mahiru the push he needed to eventually carve his own identity, while Mahiru's presence led Ko into ripping himself of his own identity due to attempting to copy his persona. Despite their arguments, the two of them just want to be friends like once before. It is likely why he gave hints onto where he was heading, because he knew Ko would understand the destination. It isn't about justice, nor is it the morality of their actions. These two just genuinely want to be friends again, grow up and see what the future holds for the three of them. But he was never going to be able to achieve the same love that Ko experiences later in the story because of the circumstances at hand. His time with Kiku is limited and she's inevitably going to die one way or another in this relationship, which we'll be discussing in the next segment in further detail. Mahiru serves as a direct parallel to Ko's character arc. Both are desperately trying to escape their unsatisfactory lives and create an identity they could call their own. However, their responses to their situations could not differ more. In Mahiru's case, his facade was a means to fight against the loneliness he harbored. Otherwise, he would have likely broken after having been truly isolated from everybody, especially his family. It was only with Ko in which he could truly be himself, far removed from any personas to play. Mahiru had truly nothing except his relationship with Ko and Akira. It was almost as though the person known as Mahiru Seki did not exist. He was merely a shadow of Shogo Seki, and I think he believed that he had to copy his brother or else he would have been truly devoid of any sense of self. In Ko's case, he was simply copying Mahiru because he knew no other way to live life. He was essentially his role model that he had to follow and become like him. He couldn't afford that persona to be disliked or fail because it would prove that Mahiru was imperfect. It is this entangled mess with Ko idolizing Mahiru's facade, which stems from him copying his brother and then includes Mahiru's jealousy of Ko for his ability to embrace his loner attitude back in elementary school, as well as the current events of the story. Furthermore, it is no coincidence that their familial situations could not be any different. It is superficially perfect, but that perfection is what leads the family into being so devoid of love and care for Mahiru. The house is clean, the mother is always at home, and they are rich. Who could ask for more? How could anybody be miserable in that scenario? At a glance, it would seem as though Mahiru has the luxury of choosing what lifestyle to pursue, given how his household looks externally, as opposed to Ko's that looks as if he has no parental care and a family that isn't particularly rich. It is highly likely as to why he is so drawn to both Kiku and his close friends, because they are the only people in his life to look at the person known as Mahiru Seki. But it was nothing short of freeing himself from one chain and being shackled to another. He is too reliant on Kiku for anything. It's intriguing. The way Kiku meets Mahiru is in direct opposition to Nazuna and Ko's initial encounter. While Nazuna initially intended to simply drink Ko's blood as a one-time interaction, it eventually led to the dynamic that we've been accustomed to over the course of the story. Whereas Kiku approaches Mahiru out of an authentic desire to be with him, which results in a manipulative dynamic where Kiku essentially controls Mahiru to discover the love that she seeks. It leaves one wondering, had the scenarios been flipped, how would have Ko handled being with Kiku? How would his perceptions of vampires change if the first vampire he met was Kiku and not Nazuna?
なずなちゃん。過去が人格を作るってさっき言ってたじゃん。
それがどうかした？
探偵さんのさ、吸血鬼を憎むようになったのだって、きっと何かがあったからだよね。吸血鬼を知ったきっかけ。俺はナズナちゃんと会ったことだ。探偵さんもきっかけさえ違えば、仲良くなれたのかな。殺したいほど憎いって何なんだろう。過去に何があれば、そんなことになるのかな。俺だったら、なんだろう。
In addition, the narrative is not merciful to Ko, as it gradually increases the stakes for his journey. First, it establishes that this relationship must be pursued under the intent that Ko will become a vampire. Otherwise, he would be murdered for knowing their identities. Next, this relationship has a time limit, which is only a year, further adding a desperate layer to his goal as he simply cannot take it easy. However, there are alternative measures to prevent these disasters, and that is the option to fall in love with another vampire and be turned that way. In that fashion, he'll no longer be at the risk of death, and he'll be able to hang out with Nazuna whenever he pleases. But if he were to pursue that option, then it would go against everything that is Koyamari. It would prove that he is nothing more than a detached individual that is incapable of having feelings for anybody. Exactly what he thought of himself earlier in the story. It would demolish the charm of his dynamic with Nazuna, it can only be Nazuna because it is her, and that is their relationship's identity. After all, the main essence of her characterization is akin to that of Ko's. She does whatever she can to stray away from vampirical norms. Vampires are naturally popular for the sake of enticing humans and making offspring. They're all equipped with various means of seduction, as seen in the multiple vampires that have been shown thus far. But Nazuna is anything but that. She is antisocial, awkward, and cannot comprehend love in the slightest. They could not be more perfect for one another. They're both attempting to ditch their own identity to pursue another.
思い出したのは最初の疑問。人間ってなんだろう。自分はなんで人間じゃないんだろう。
Azami and Suzuki truly highlight the similarities between vampire and human in how they acquire their blood, and it is all due to the fact that they have no interest in creating offspring, exactly the same way some humans aren't interested in having a family. Individuality isn't exclusive to humans. The vampires in Call of the Night all display it in their own manner. For instance, take Seri Kikyo, the first vampire introduced after Nazuna, who was utilized to explore the complexities of being a vampire in of itself. She resembles Nazuna's character in how she yearns to reject her vampirism and embrace humanity. But what separates her from Nazuna is that Seri lives by the nature of a vampire. Every waking day, she is instinctively talking to multiple men, all under the guise of creating offspring, nothing more or less. That's what it truly means to be a vampire. To be devoid of any feelings or emotions and simply act in accordance to your intrinsic vampiric desires. But it is so miserable, and her relationship with Ko is essential to convey that point. To embrace vampirism, one must treat love as nothing but a means to an end, and Seri begrudgingly accepts that fact. She doesn't want to face her own feelings and seek that answer within love, and instead runs away from that answer itself to chase after friendship.
飽きちゃったんだよ、そういうの。退屈なんだよ。でもこんなの誰に言えばいいんだ。人との関わりすべてに恋愛がついてくることに疲れちゃったなんて。でも普通の友達みたいなコミュニケーション知らないんだ。無意識で相手を惚れさせようと振る舞っちゃう。あ、今押せばこいつ私のこと好きになるなって疲れちゃった。
Life is more than just dates and romance, and Seri embodies that mindset. It is one of many endless perspectives shown to Ko to leave the viewer questioning whether or not Ko will find his answers throughout vampirism if the only thing ahead of him regarding love is nothing but soulless manipulation. None of these vampires want to act this way. They aren't mindless killing machines. They're simply just mortals trying to survive and live life, exactly like humans.
あんたら怖いんだ。人を殺すのが。殺しなんかしたくないんだ。普通なんだよ。俺たちと何も変わらない。力が強いから強い言葉も平気で使う。でもあんたらの言う殺すは俺たちのニュアンスと同じなんだ。口先で生きってるだけなんだよ。吸血鬼は。俺はあなたたちのことが好きなんだ。俺たちよりも人間臭い吸血鬼のことが。
Many would be afraid of killing one another, and that's part of what makes one human. And in that fashion, these vampires stray away from their vampirism and highlight a layer of humanity through their reluctance to kill, despite what they may claim. I think it's why he insists on preventing Seri from falling victim to this mindset, likely due to the fact that he himself can relate to that. It's how he ended up here in the first place. He was tired of living the way humans expected him to, and simply wanted to live as Ko Yamari. And likewise, Seri just wanted to be with Akun wholeheartedly, free from this game of deception that vampires are required to play. He was the person that truly freed her from that agonizing procedure, liberated from the societal expectations within vampires, as seen in how they expected the same from Nazuna. The fact that Seri falls in love with Akun is a gigantic ordeal to serve as the story's first introduction at what kinds of vampires reside in this world. They're all just like humans. Hell, some are even wanting to revert back to humanity. Just like Ko, Seri does not want her identity to be just her vampirism. She wants to embrace the person that is Seri Kikyo. Their love truly encompasses its ability to transcend matters between vampires and humans alike, something that will be emphasized at various times in the story, for better or worse.
これさ、あっくんと初めて会った時のメガネだよね。あっくんが酔っ払って転んで、私が拾ったやつ。 ありがとね。
僕はまだ吸血鬼になって日が浅いから大体のことは覚えてる。でもいつか忘れちゃうんだろう。セリちゃんと初めて会った時のことも、セリちゃんのことが好きだって気づいた日のことも。
私が覚えてるよ。だから安心して忘れてよ。私は忘れないから。それに思い出は新しく作りゃいいじゃん。だから泣かないでよ、あっくん。
Kabura Honda is an interesting case, as she is actually at odds with Ko. She didn't have the luxury of freedom due to her illness and yearned for connections. It is no coincidence that Kabura's character is all about what it means to hate something. What's interesting is that she is one of the only characters to seek normalcy, further adding layers to the story and supporting the notion that I've referenced when speaking about Akira. Kabura simply wanted a life that everybody took for granted. It is quite ironic that Kabura acquires freedom and satisfaction after turning into a vampire, because her main problem has always been physical, and that is something that can be fixed by becoming a vampire. Despite that, there is a price to pay for becoming one, and it is inevitable for every single one of them. They will eventually forget everything regarding their human lives, gradually leaving those treasured memories to become nothing but memories. Had Kabura not had blood she stored of herself, she would have completely forgotten everything about Haru.
ヤモリ君は初恋まだなんですってね。
はい。
私はハルさんが初恋だった。もちろん人間の時の私がそう言ってただけでもう覚えてないけれど、私はきっともうまともじゃない。ハルさんがどんなことを考えて私の血を吸ったのか理解したくて、ハルさんになりたくて血を吸ってきた。ヤモリ君、君は私みたいにならないで。ナズナと仲良くね。
One after another, these characters all blatantly warn Ko to not end up like them, warning him not to make the same mistakes that they've done in the past, further showing different perspectives on what it means to be a vampire. Kabura's character serves to add another layer to Ko's story, the notion that there are problems that can be salvaged by becoming a vampire. But there is an inescapable fatal flaw that completely crushes Ko's journey of self-discovery. He would eventually lose everything that makes him Ko Yamori. Moreover, amidst many of the vampires that are on a journey to discover who they want to be and what path they want to pursue, Midori manages to stand out in the story as the only character to have no interest in her past, nor struggle with embracing herself for who she is. She is debatably the most confident and stable character in the series, as she is fully aware of who she wants to be and truly understands the path that she wants to pursue, all the while enjoying her relationship with Love Green. There is one character that embodies everything the story wants to say in the first half of the story, and that is none other than Anku Uguisu, the private detective. Her presence is utilized to confront everything the story intends to explore and force these characters to face their backstories, motivations, and upbringings without making it feel out of place. It is just too poetic that the vampire's biggest weakness is their human past, as if the story is insisting that in order for Ko to truly become a vampire, he will have to free himself of his human life, which would go against everything he's learned up until this point. It's why Akun's segment regarding destroying his old glasses is shown, as well as Kabura's backstory, to highlight the tragic fate of every vampire, the curse of being unable to cherish what they've once had wholeheartedly. To truly become a vampire, one must abolish all human connections, essentially deserting one's past identity and be reborn. Anko comes off as this aloof and light-hearted individual, but beneath that exterior is a terrifying force to be reckoned with. Up until this very moment, no character has truly opposed every single nook and cranny of Ko's characterization in the way Anko Uguisu does. She has thrown away everything that could truly make life wonderful, all in pursuit of vengeance. She is the antithesis of this story. She actually rejects her individuality and does whatever it takes to uphold normalcy in society. Humans must be the ones influencing other humans.
今日あなたに会えてよかった。
何を？
だからね、私はあなたを人間として死なせてあげる。
nothing more or less. Not only that, but she also discards any possibility of vampires' individuality, essentially categorizing them all in one box. Repulsive and disgusting, thereby clashing with the story's overarching theme of individuality. Almost nothing is known of her in this point of the story, and it is by design. It only makes sense that the one that takes on a false name as a detective, whose role is to investigate other people's lives and identities, is the one that lacks it all themselves. Her hatred of vampires stresses on what I had discussed earlier in regards to Akira and Co. Most humans would not be able to accept such an unknown species, and so in a way, Anko comes off as much more grounded in reality as opposed to those two characters. While various characters highlight the difficulties of vampirism, Anko presents the horrors of the process of becoming one. It is quite an obvious question, and yet it has never crossed Ko's mind once. What happens if a human rejects their new vampiric form? Anko serves to explore a different facet of Ko's naivete that hasn't been shown previously, his ignorance of vampires. While he has been frequently around them over the course of the narrative, he does not truly understand what it means to be a vampire. That is the foundation of Anko's character. The concept of humans obliviously turning into vampires is what drives her into this obsessive goal of eradicating all vampires, and it is all thanks to what had occurred to her father. Her backstory is what truly sheds light on the individual known as Anko Uguisu, or more accurately known by her real name, Kyoku Mejiro. Despite Anko's narrative purpose, she shares various similarities to Ko, especially with her relationship to Nazuna. It adds this dichotomy between the two of them, as their lives were drastically changed from their relationship with a vampire, and it all hinged on their circumstances. It is quite ironic. The very same goal both led them into completely opposite relationships with Nazuna. It tarnished Anko's relationship with her, while it only strengthened Nazuna's relationship with Ko. The story utilizes Nazuna's relationship to these two by exploring her relevance in the story's most prominent themes, love and individuality. Prior to meeting Anko, Nazuna was essentially a shell that lacked a sense of self. She was quite detached from anything she came across. In a way, she resembled the typical vampire, alluring and compelling, one that draws people towards her. It is only through her interactions with Anko that leads her into learning what it means to become more human, akin to Ko's journey of wanting to become a vampire through Nazuna. She is seen enjoying herself with Anko as the two of them are able to play detective in attempts to discover the truth behind her father. Despite the fact that Anko's main narrative purpose being to oppose Ko, she holds various intriguing similarities when it comes to her upbringing. Her atypical nature stems from her terrible familial situation, especially in regards to the way she is harsh to boys. Like Ko, she strays from normalcy and comes off as an oddball, quite different from the usual girls her age. However, there are distinctions between the way she is in comparison to Ko in this regard. She does not play facades for the sake of coming off as normal, and most importantly, her actions had meaning to them. They stemmed from her personal beliefs. She was not aimless, as she had a motive in uncovering her father's cheating. It wasn't out of a sense of justice, she simply just disliked it, and it is in direct opposition to Ko's actions before the beginning of the story. He truly knew no other way to live, and simply acted out what he thought was how he should be like. She had an identity, one that had a loving household, and parents who wanted to cherish her despite the arduous circumstances at hand. A girl who was passionately into books and can come off weirdly at times, but is overall sweet. A girl who yearned for her parents to look her way and be punished for being out all night. It is one of the vital differences between Kyoko, Ko, and Nazuna. Kyoko does not want to be alone.
母さんは私に興味がないみたいだ。ずっと胸がずっと苦しくて話せるような友人もいない。話したってこんなこと大したことじゃないって。どこの家だって悩みの一つや二つあるだろ。でも苦しいんだよ。一生こんな気持ちで生きてるのか。七草、私はどうしたらいい？助けて。
It couldn't be any more poetically catastrophic for her. Ko's parents are divorced, his mother is barely around, and yet she still treasures and supports him in every action he takes. Whereas Anko has had her parents right next to her and she felt completely isolated from everybody. It is what leads her into wanting to become a vampire, escaping misery. This is arguably the most important difference between the two characters. As explained earlier, Ko has had the luxury of a great life with a reputable position in class, a loving mother, great friends in Akira and Mahiru, and so much more. But it all just felt empty, and it's what led him to where he's currently at. He had the opportunity to pursue this lifestyle that many would dream to acquire, but he was willing to throw it all away for the possibility of fulfillment. When it comes to Anko, she has nothing. Fulfillment was the least of her worries. Becoming a vampire was the only means of a satisfactory lifestyle. She simply just wanted not to suffer and desired any means of escaping that hardship. We've seen this prior with Kabura's situation, but a miracle occurred for Anko, and her family had attempted to make amends with her and start anew. She is finally shown that her parents did care and love her. Perhaps she no longer needed to become a vampire if her misery was going to disappear. But everything was tarnished, and it was all by the hands of the very thing that was going to pull her out of her distress. The story utilizes Anko in this backstory to highlight the same message I have been insisting over the course of this video. Turning into a vampire as a shortcut from your problems is not the answer. It hasn't and it never will be, and Anko is no exception. Remember, vampires are fundamentally manipulative. They must live life deceptively in order to survive, and it's what Seri's segment was setting up. This is the true lifestyle befitting of a vampire, and the point of exploring their various kinds in the story is to establish that they aren't interested in adhering to those philosophies. It's one of the core themes of the narrative. Your identity can transcend your race. However, what Anko's character seeks is the answer to the following. What about the vampires who truly embrace who they are? What about the ones who are either unable to excel their identities above the race or simply yearn to embrace vampirism?
ヤモリ君、少しは考えて発言しなよ。誰が好き好んで吸血鬼になんかなりたい。
Could Ko confidently claim that he is capable of accepting his newfound identity as a vampire, or would he fall into the same rabbit hole that the teacher did and eventually die of starvation? This is truly the ultimate test for his goal, as it not only challenges his resolve and forces him to face his obliviousness to vampires, but it also tackles one of Ko's strongest assets, his ability to look at the unfathomable and still accept it for what it is. It's what he and Akira share. They have never feared the unfathomable and were able to see people for who they truly are, as seen in how Ko treats vampires. But for the first time ever, he was scared of the very thing he should have feared from the beginning. So then it begs the question, what exactly is this journey for? Is it for freedom? Because if that were the case, then it is futile. He has already acquired everything he desired at this point. He is able to roam freely in the night alongside Nazuna, who he cherishes as a close friend, and it's evident in the shift of his goals. It's fascinating. It initially was about being with Nazuna and utilizing love to become a vampire to acquire freedom, but now that he has that freedom in of itself, the goal to become a vampire has become nothing but a vehicle to stay with her. Freedom in of itself is to no longer be shackled to the usual. But what happens when that freedom becomes the usual? It would transition from freedom to a routine, which would result in an endless search for something unique. It is a feeling that can become quite destructive if left unchecked.
どうしてこうくんは夜を楽しいと感じたんだと思う？
自由だから。
そうだね、正解ではある。でももっと言うなら、その日常が非日常だからだ。君の日常は昼や学校、対して夜だ。とても刺激的だっただろう。しかしどうだろう。こうくんは今、最初に出た夜と同等、もしくはそれ以上の刺激を感じているか？今の楽しさはすでに日常化しているんじゃないか？こうくん、非日常なんてものはね、長くは続かないんだよ。 吸血鬼なんて退屈なだけだよ。ごめんね、嘘ついてて。吸血鬼になってうん十年と経ったけど、退屈でしかなかった。薄い毎日を時間が過ぎるのを待ってるだけでさ。
Anko's conclusion truly encapsulates her role in highlighting a different perspective on the story. A character so lifeless, almost driven to taking her own life multiple times. In a story that wants to convey the charm of life, Anko is the only character who sees no purpose in it if her life isn't utilized to completely destroy vampires. However, she shows her humanity better than anybody else in the story through her fear of death. No matter how suicidal she felt, the trigger just could not be pulled. Ironically, she's always been the character to embrace humanity best. It's the basis behind all her actions in the first place. Her goal of vampiric destruction is because they break the natural chain of humanity, to essentially uphold humanity's place right where it belongs. But this may just have been another one of her many lies. She wanted what Ko had: love, friends, and a reputable life, all to escape this hellish nightmare. She doesn't seek a unique experience. She simply wants an experience she could call her life. This is just my interpretation, but I think she was trying her hardest to convince herself to enjoy this goal to its fullest, given the fact that it was the only thing that brought her joy. Further supported in her fight against Nazuna, she clearly cherishes her time with her. After all, she was prepared to throw her life away in the most grandiose way imaginable for her ridiculous plan to end the night. Rather than escape the mundane, she yearns to escape the misery that haunts her on a daily basis.
吸血鬼を殺すことばかり考えて生きてきた。家族を壊した吸血鬼を恨むことで何かを保ってきた。父を吸血鬼にしたやつへの怒りを吸血鬼全体に向けることでしか保てない何かがあった。
A plan so outrageous that even a child would scoff at, to essentially provoke vampires into killing her, therefore leading her into becoming symbolic proof of their existence and in turn eventually end the night. Ironically, it highlights Anko's naivete, something that she was initially established to critique Ko on. But Anko had to bank everything on this plan. She wanted to believe that this would lead everybody to no longer go out at night for a decade. Otherwise, what was the point of her life to begin with? Those experiences can't be worthless because they shaped her to become the Kyoku Mejiro that is standing here today.
もう少し人間らしく生きようと思ってね。知っての通り、私はこの10年間吸血鬼を殺すことばかり考えて生きてきた。失った時間は取り戻せない。私は年を取った。もう若くない。そう思った。
What truly separates the two characters is what's been mentioned in this video various times: Ko's resolve to move forward despite the circumstances ahead of him. He's seen the horrors of becoming a vampire, and yet he still pursues a relationship with one. Ko has never been one to back down from his goals. He simply adjusts certain parts of it depending on what he learns with each encounter. He truly is the bridge between both species, and his hybrid form is symbolic of that. He is the character who fights for their coexistence and understands vampires best at the end of the story, and through overcoming Anko in this arc, he manages to get one step closer. I think the instance that solidifies Anko as an exceptional character is the aftermath of this arc, and it's her plans going forward. One of the focal points of the story is not adhering to the masses and embracing her identity. It's been a major character arc for so many characters through Ko, Nazuna, Mahiru, and even Akira. In Anko's case, while she does desire it, being normal in of itself is difficult. What does it even mean to be normal? The fact that Anko is struggling with such problems is proof enough of her willingness to grow. She is concerned about real-world problems instead of dedicating her entire livelihood for revenge, thereby embracing the person known as Kyoku Mejiro. Instead of throwing away everything that made her who she is, she ends up pursuing what she likely has found fulfillment in: detective work, and I think this scene truly describes what Call of the Night is all about. It is later supported in the epilogue. She works alongside Ko as detectives, which was foreshadowed much earlier in the story. It is something that Ko had been seeking from the very beginning, to truly embrace himself as Ko Yamari and live a life that can be satisfying. Every experience in life is meaningful, as those bits and pieces shape us to be who we are today. It is only through letting go of that obsession for revenge is when Anko regains her identity. It is never too late to turn your life around, but it can only be complete by acquiring the closure on the chapter of revenge. Life is full of regrets for everybody, whether it be a commitment towards a fruitless passion, or perhaps a decision that led towards catastrophic events. It's easy to fall into an endless pit of agony over those decisions and ponder on the what-ifs. In this case, closure is necessary, and it's why Anko ends up pursuing Kiku Hoshimi once more without the vengeful undertones. Her story is far from over. She must find the answers regarding her father to put an end to this chapter in her life. Throughout the second half of the story, she slowly undergoes development akin to Ko's. She now has important companions in both he and Nazuna, as they both genuinely want to understand her struggles, and it can only be done in one manner, facing the vampire head on. But it's scary, especially with the type of character Kiku is and the mysterious nature that she harbors as the only character in the story that can be truly described as a vampire. This confrontation is the final obstacle for Kyoko. At long last, she is facing the sole cause of everything miserable in her life up until this point, the vampire that ruined everything for their own desire to seek love. It is essential to mention that even in this instance, she is dying to kill Kiku, and it's taking everything in her power to prevent herself from doing so. It adds layers to Kyoko, as moving on from such a traumatic event is not easy, especially having to face the root of it all. But Kyoko is aware. She knows that Kiku is not the only source of her problems. Her dad's unfaithfulness played a part in it as well. She simply wanted to put all the blame on Kiku to serve as a scapegoat for everything that had occurred. Revenge in of itself is utterly pointless and unfulfilling, and Kyoko is the perfect depiction of it. It serves no purpose other than the simple gratification of destroying somebody that has once destroyed you. It is vivid in Kyoko's aimlessness over the past decade, which has led her to become so destructive and depressed. It may have been the scenario Ko could have found himself in if his first encounter with the vampire were different. Perhaps he may have felt the same emptiness which Kyoko has felt from chasing revenge, due to eventually losing the feeling of freshness for the night. In conveying life's meaning and beauty, the story emphasizes the pointlessness of revenge through Kyoko's character arc. Confrontation is essential to move forward, or else she would always wonder about her father's true feelings. The story is aware of this, and it's what Kiku's hideout is utilized for. Her father really did regret his actions. He really cherished his daughter and wanted her to be at her happiest. I think she knew this as well, as she has seen her father's computer all the way back when she was still friends with Nazuna. But it was revenge that completely clouded that realization. It is also supported in how, despite telling Nazuna to stay away from Ko in the final arc, not even she herself knows if she believes that anymore. And from here on out, she is just looking for a place for herself in this vast world. She joins Suzuki in Vietnam to see if it's right up her alley, but it doesn't end up being the case, and that's what life is all about. The journey to seek that meaning in it through trial and error. It is those experiences that carve out your identity.
探偵さんは自分が大人になったなって自覚するタイミングはありました？
どうかな。年を重ねるだけじゃ大人にはなれないんだな。おそらく多くの人間が大人になる過程で通っていく成功や失敗。きっと私はそれらの何一つ知らないんだ。人、仕事、会社、友達、恋愛。
Alongside individualism, love is another essential theme in Call of the Night. One of the central points of the story is the inevitability a romance between vampire and human shall experience. And this is highlighted perfectly in the conclusion of Seri and Akun's dynamic. They are no longer equals, and their relationship simply devolves into nothing but a resemblance of a parent and child. It is quite likely that this will eventually happen to Midori and Love Green's relationship as well. The fate of all vampiric relationships is to never result in heartfelt connection. There are various layers to love, whether it be possessive, obsessive, manipulative, or authentic. It is all mainly explored through four major characters: Ko, Nazuna, Mahiru, and most importantly, Kiku Hoshimi. She is the first vampire to actively search for the answer that no vampire has found, to truly attempt escaping the curse of love that haunts all vampires, and that can only be possible through a typical romance. But it is her lack of understanding basic human fundamentals that leads her into assuming that it must be a perfect romantic film for it to be what she so desires, rather than a grounded relationship between two people who cherish each other. While Anko served to be the antithesis to individualism and life, Kiku is the antithesis to the concept of desire for fresh experiences in Ko, as she yearns for normalcy. It is this aspect of Kiku that truly presents her as Ko's opposite. Despite the fact that she has had the luxury of experiencing countless fresh situations, she simply desires something normal. To be normal is to go against what it means to be a vampire. She is quite complex. On one hand, she can be mysterious, aggressive, and hostile, and on the other, she is romantic, emotional, and faithful to her partner. As discussed in the previous segment, Ko's perspective on love commences superficially, as seen in his immediate deduction that he has fallen in love with Nazuna from a simple kiss, thinking that this is all it takes to be in love. While he isn't intentionally malicious, one may insinuate that this comes off insensitively, as it is being excited merely for new experiences rather than the feeling of love itself.
僕の認識が正しければの話だが、自分の口と他者の口が触れる行為は、あれはキスって言うんだよな。僕はキスされたのか。何のつもりだ、七草ナズナ。待てよ。ということは、僕はもうナズナちゃんのことが好きなのでは？
Just a quick reminder to let you all know that if you're enjoying the content, to be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Memberships are finally available now that we are partnered with YouTube, so be sure to join if you're interested to support the channel. Back to the video. It is all a setup between his dynamic to Kiku Hoshimi, as he utilizes love to discover fresh events, whereas Kiku utilizes novel affairs to create a standard romantic love. It couldn't be more fitting that the story's final antagonist attempts to utilize the same method Ko has tried much earlier, and is to take advantage of Vampire's ability to confirm one's feelings. If her partners were killed after feeding on them, or if she were to be killed, then it would prove that Kiku has finally found true love, and she would be able to physicalize that feeling, exactly the same way Anko had strived to throw her life away to be physical proof of Vampire's existence. This segment does also demonstrate another obstacle for Ko, and that is the distinction between love and lust. It is also visible in Ko's reaction to Nazuna's new look after taking a bath. It makes one wonder, what exactly is the relationship? He currently views her as a friend, which is why he is so reluctant to experience lust towards her, but he must face those emotions, and it's what the next segment aims to tackle after the encounters with the main antagonist for this part of the story. The first half of the narrative was to challenge Ko's decision to try becoming a vampire, and question it in its entirety, to essentially answer whether or not this was the true path for Ko's happiness. And now that Ko has seen all the various perspectives on what it means to live as a vampire, the second half of the story intends to ask about his feelings towards love. Is he capable of feeling such emotions? On top of that, it wants to put a label on the dynamic that has built the entire story in the first place. What kind of relationships do they desire after the many dynamics they've witnessed over the course of the time they've been together? What would be the best course of action for their happiness? The fixation of love was first explored in Rila Echigo, a student at Nico's class. She is the first glance at the irrationality of love that the story intends to explore in this portion of the narrative. If you've only seen the anime, then you'll be confused on the relevance of this character, and that is due to her arc being removed from the adaptation, as well as the scenes including her being replaced by Akira. She is shackled to love, endlessly chasing that high over and over again, desiring to live in a fantasy, one where all her partners are ideal princes, leading her into dating almost everybody in the class at one point or another. However, due to her inability to accept reality, it causes her to lose interest almost immediately, hence leading to breaking up with her partners. However, the reasoning behind her breaking up with Ko is not because of that. In fact, it is the opposite. She was afraid of losing that image of Ko and ended the relationship before things got to that point. She is simply obsessed with being in love. Despite her trivial relevance in the narrative, I think she functions to indirectly foreshadow the story's most important antagonist, the one that lives for love and wishes to create a fantasy reminiscent of a romantic film. She is the next and final obstacle for Ko after facing Anko in the previous arc and cementing his dedication to becoming a vampire. Of course, I'm referring to none other than Kiku Hoshimi, the oldest vampire in the series. She is the root of almost all problems the characters have been facing, a mysterious force to be reckoned with, and the only vampire that can be truly considered one. Just like how Anko defies the story's overarching theme of life's significance, Kiku opposes the overarching theme of coexistence. She is nothing like the other vampires and does not exhibit human qualities as the story has highlighted through characters such as Nico, Seri, and Nazuna. She is exactly the type of vampire that Anko has warned Ko about, and is what leads her to not believe in coexistence.
その吸血鬼になりたいって話なんですけど、探偵さんはどうしてそれを否定するんですか？
君も変なことを言うな。吸血鬼は人にとって悪だからに決まってるだろう。私はね、人が人を不幸にするのは時と場合によって仕方のないことだと思っているが、吸血鬼にされるのはたまったもんじゃないと思っている。人は人と生きる。衝突は避けられない。が、人以外の意志によって本来なかったはずの不幸は私は許せない。吸血鬼は人を不幸にしかしない。
After all, Kiku's story is to completely defy vampirism in of itself. She could not be a more fitting final antagonist, an authentic vampire desperately rejecting the essence of vampirism, yet is constantly agonizing over the countless amounts of victims she's turned into vampires due to her vampiric abilities. It could not scream a dichotomy between her and Ko louder than it already is. They are both the perfect representation of their species, and yet they both hopelessly want to become the other. While Ko and Nazuna do harbor the same contrast, the difference is that Nazuna does not exhibit any vampiric traits as explained previously. While Anko has presented the horrifying nature of vampires through her introduction, none have truly terrified Ko as much as Kiku herself, and this is vivid in their first interaction. From the very moment he comes across her, he is instantly met with an uneasy feeling and immediately attempts to flee the scene. She is riddled with various deceptions within her character, from the constant switching between an anxious woman in love to a horrifying vampire willing to murder any who dare get in her way. And above all, the fact that it is all a core part of who Kiku Hoshimi is. She isn't just playing a facade. Like Ko, she is on a journey to understand love.
めちゃくちゃ優秀な吸血鬼だよ、キクは。何人も眷属にしてる。ただ、キクは何がしたいんだろう。前に変なことを言ってたんだ。また眷属にしちゃった。こんな予定じゃなかったのに。
The story has shown various kinds of vampire-human relationships, but none highlight the true potential destructive nature it entails better than Kiku and Mahiru's dynamic. While their feelings are mutual, there is one terminal issue at hand, Kiku's idealization of love. She has painted a picture in her head of what love should be, and it is the foundation of her actions. It is why she is seen pushing Mahiru to sacrifice everything for her, because to her, that is romantic and indicative of true love. But those actions are the leading cause of Mahiru's deterioration. He is seen to be disheveled, hostile, and stubborn towards Ko, and his exterior friendly persona has long since faded away. He is completely entranced by Kiku and is acting in accordance to Vampire's interests. He is no longer his extroverted self because that was never Mahiru Seki to begin with. Ko had always assumed Mahiru to be who he presented himself as. He never thought about the possibility that Mahiru was almost in a similar boat as he was. Mahiru is slowly treading into the path that Ko has been following this entire time. He is in love with a vampire, on the way to becoming one not only physically, but also mentally. In an ironic sense, Mahiru's motivation to become a vampire is almost entirely clashing with Ko's. While he does utilize his relationship with Kiku as the trigger to finally escape the miserable life he's been leading, he does not treat love in the superficial manner the way Ko had previously done. Mahiru genuinely loved Kiku, and many of his actions were derived from those feelings. And yet, he is completely under the palm of Kiku's hands and intends to act in accordance with the vampire's benefits. As said multiple times in this video, the story has shown Ko various scenarios for every facet of his motivations to constantly challenge his character, to react and grow from each of those situations. Seri's segment was there to highlight the soulless fate all vampires must face in their inability to truly connect with other individuals due to their inherent desire to create offspring. Anko's arc was there to present Ko the potential danger in his goal to become a vampire. And in this case, Mahiru's arc is there to present Ko the aftermath of being entranced with a vampire and the horrors that love may ensue. And it is all thanks to none other than Kiku Hoshimi. Throughout Call of the Night, there has never been an occasion that has shown Ko the terrors of love itself. While various characters Ko has met have faced multiple struggles in relations to love, the feeling in of itself was never the actual issue at hand. For instance, Seri's struggles were due to her inability to love or befriend anybody in particular. While she had attempted to kill Akun due to her feelings towards him, it was simply because she was desperately rejecting those feelings and tried forcibly bottling them up. Her character was not focused on the dangers of love. Honda's feelings towards Haru may also insinuate a similar point, but those feelings were never a cause of malice aside from her initial decision to kill Nazuna after Haru had ditched her, but that was immediately dispelled after she met Nazuna. It was only through Mahiru and Kiku's arcs where love is presented horrifically, the lengths one may go to simply for the cause of proving their feelings or perhaps desiring reciprocation. Love had driven Mahiru to want to harm others for the sake of love. Maybe this is what love is all about, to abolish all factors and focus on nothing but your partner. In a way, this is the direct opposite to what Seri and Akun's relationship was meant to show narratively. Their love transcended whatever species they were. Despite the fact that there will come a time where Akun will forget his initial feelings for Seri, they come to terms with it and are set on creating memories to make up for what he will eventually forget. Even when that inevitability has caught up to them, they will always be friends, regardless of those circumstances at hand. In Kiku and Mahiru's case, their love is shackled because of what species they are. Kiku's curse of being a vampire prevents her love bearing fruit and embracing the typical romance that she so desperately seeks. With Ko's determination on his journey to become a vampire through Ko's arc, it is the perfect time to finalize his characterization by showing him a nightmarish path that he may have ended up on had the circumstances been flipped. It begs the question, just who exactly is Kiku Hoshimi? Is she who Mahiru describes her to be? She is the perfect antagonist for this portion of the story, as she serves to oppose the main protagonist's relationship at hand, as shown in the way her relationship with Mahiru is presented. It is almost abundantly clear that the two of them are not equal in their dynamic when compared to Nazuna and Ko. It is the basis behind both of their actions. She is practically a much more fleshed out version of Rila Echigo. Through her life as a vampire, she has attempted to pursue a relationship with various men over and over again to no avail. However, there is one essential commonality within all these conclusions: her somber expression upon feeding on her victims. It was proof that her love was not genuine, and the story initially discusses two possibilities on Kiku's goal to achieve that end: whether she is trying to kill a human or is trying to get herself killed. Although, it is essential to note that her actions are not malicious. She has genuinely tried loving the countless individuals she's been with, but it was always superficial due to her inability to comprehend love. Otherwise, she wouldn't have announced her relationship to Mahiru's mother. While this was partially a means to force Mahiru to sacrifice everything, it also stems from an authentic desire to experience real love. And that is by officially declaring your relationship to your partner's parents. In addition, Kiku did also want to help Mahiru, as her happiness upon Mahiru finally overcoming his hatred for his mother does support that notion. She didn't need to proceed to the next step, as simply asking to take care of Mahiru would have been enough to remove his mother from the equation. After all, she was nothing but a terrible mother for her carelessness for his well-being and simply forced him to live in his brother's shadow. He was prevented from attending class trips because his brother never went to any. If a part of Ko's story is learning about the sparkle of life and love, then I would consider a portion of Mahiru's to be understanding the insignificance of hatred and the dead. Latching onto the dead to neglect the ones who are alive is what led to this broken family in the first place. This isn't to imply that the dead do not matter, but they should not be put on a pedestal to the point where the ones who are still standing are dismissed. It is in this section that truly showcases Kiku for who she truly is. She isn't the malicious individual that the story has painted her as. She genuinely operates in this manner, thinking that this is the only way to communicate faithfulness between lovers. While this is not a means of justifying her insensitive actions which has led families being destroyed, as seen in Anko's story, one cannot deny her willingness to help a young Mahiru despite it not being beneficial to her. She could have easily said something pretentious that may have satisfied him, but something about the harsh circumstance that such a young boy was put in made her feel that it was necessary to give a meaningful response to him. She truly craves standard love, something normal, something human. But there was another vampire who managed to acquire what Kiku had desired: to abandon her vampirism, truly embracing life, and experiencing romance normally. Of course, I'm referring to Haru no Nakusa, Nazuna's mother. She is the only vampire in Call of the Night to have reproduced in a human manner and actually ended up living like one. While some of the vampires thought about their origins, none have pondered on it as much as Haru. She is one of the only vampires to truly question their fundamental nature. What exactly are vampires? Why are they such capable creatures? What does it mean to be a vampire? Interestingly, there is one trait in Haru that isn't present in any other vampire: her rejection of immortality. Vampirism in of itself is a rejection of life. To embrace life, one must anticipate death, and it is only then where one would truly feel alive. Death is not a concept within vampires due to their durability as well as their immensely long lifespan, resulting in nothing but an endless stream of monotonous routines, the same ones that Ko had been trying to escape from by becoming a vampire. Life is special because it is limited. It's why she wanted human experiences, because that is the only way to truly feel alive, and Nazuna was physical proof of this. Reproduction by feeding is not fulfilling, and again, this was what Seri's episode establishes. Her tendency to speak to others was simply for the sake of getting people to fall for her, and that was nothing more than a means of survival, devoid of any intimate connections. Haru marrying a regular human and having Nazuna in a human manner signifies her genuine love for that human. One of the most interesting distinctions between Haru and Kiku is how they go about becoming human. Haru essentially tries living like one without needing to actually turn into a human, as seen in her actions after deciding to get married. She stops drinking blood altogether, and she truly did manage to die like a human, even if she was fundamentally a vampire. This is evident here with Haruka's comment on both how Kiku and Haru felt human in that instance. It was simply that passion they had for finding answers that made them feel human, and I think something about that perfectly encapsulates Haru's character. She and Kiku are both two sides of the same coin. While Haru embraces humanity through the love she had found with a human despite never becoming one, Kiku searches for love so that she can turn human and experiencing a romance in which the two of them will be married, have kids, and live life happily ever after. Haru yearns for realism while Kiku desires fantasy. But it is that fantasy that drives Kiku into madness in search of that perfect romantic tale. From isolating Mahiru to severing all his ties to everybody around him, she essentially operates almost entirely on creating the ideal story, straight out of a movie. She simply cannot fathom that for it to truly be love, it must be an equal relationship. But something about Mahiru was different, and it's likely why she can't help but put him on a pedestal. He should be the one for her, but what if their dynamic wasn't true love? Her ignorance of the definition of love is what results in their manipulative relationship, as that idealization is what leads to her losing her mind once she finds out that Mahiru was not the perfect person that she envisioned him as. He wasn't able to throw every single thing away. It must be all or nothing. Love must be grandiose, as the feeling is something to be viewed like a spectacle. They would only have each other and nothing else is necessary. But does love need to be viewed as though it were a dramatic play?
不思議だった。こんなにも多くの人々が当然のように恋愛と共にいた。タイミングが重なるとドラマに移る。しかし実のところ人生にドラマはない。ドラマなんかなくても人は恋愛ができる。恋愛なんて特別なことじゃない。
It's exactly why she enjoys tragic romantic movies so much, because she yearns for such a show. However, love does not have to be special, as simply the mundane moments while being in love can be special in of itself. It's exactly what leads Kiku into realizing her true feelings for Mahiru. The moments that would have been dull without him turned into something spectacular. She truly is a slave to the feeling, and it's this that really does encapsulate her character. Exactly like Rila Echigo. It is the only way of life for her. It's precisely why she is willing to throw her life away just to prove that feeling. However, in a way, one may argue that like Ko, this conquest is nothing but superficial when considering the way she has been utilizing all her partners up until this point. She too has been using love as a means to achieve an end. All her partners have merely been tools for creating that flawless story, and it's likely why she was never able to find her answer throughout her 1,000-year-long journey. But what separates her from Ko is the fact that she utilizes love for love itself, whereas in Ko's case, he was simply making use of love to get out of his boring life, as seen in the moment discussed earlier with his reaction upon being kissed by Nazuna. This is not to say that she only views Mahiru as a mechanism for romance. However, Kiku must understand that the uncertainty and realism in love is what makes it special, as she herself theorizes on this fact. Nevertheless, that uncertainty in love is terrifying to experience, to both never be fully confident in your own feelings or to think about the possibility that the feelings may not be mutual. There is so much more to life than just romance, but to Kiku, it is her everything. What purpose is there to life without love?
正直ちょっと最近はめんどくさいっつうか、まあそんなやつをいちいち相手すんのだりっつうか。ごめん、わかんないよな。
なんとなくわかりますよ。俺だって恋愛こそが人生の本質ってやつらムカつくもん。
She and Anko are chained to what they pursue in hopes that it will bring fulfillment to their lives, and it couldn't be more poetic. These two have been clashing with one another throughout the entire story, and yet have had their entire worlds clouded by love and revenge respectively, with the intention of contrasting it with Ko's characterization. Kiku is such a perfect character not only in providing another perspective for Ko to witness the potential horrors of being in love with a vampire, but also highlighting the destructive tendency that love can bring about. Love is precious, but it isn't always healthy. It can be possessive and self-sacrificial, and it is all evident in Kiku's and Mahiru's character arcs. Her refusal to view Mahiru as a normal person is what leads to her desperation to anxiously wonder if she is good enough for Mahiru once she realizes that he is not the flawless person that she initially viewed him as. This is not the answer that Ko seeks in love, and it would not lead him into happiness with Nazuna. It's honestly intriguing. Kiku manages to showcase her vampirism through her goal of becoming human, as seen in the way she operates in the story, whereas Ko is the complete opposite. He embodies what it means to be a human through his journey to become a vampire. I think Mahiru's conclusion truly captures another aspect of what Call of the Night is all about. While this isn't the answer Ko has been looking for, it was for Mahiru and Kiku. He truly, sincerely, and wholeheartedly loves Kiku, and it is only in these chapters that their conversations come off the most genuine they've ever been. The tendency to let go of all the idealized images of Mahiru, the obsession to force him to sacrifice everything, and the romanticized perspective she's had on love is all gone, especially with her fixation on self-sacrifice. Mahiru couldn't commit to it as he just couldn't choose between his lover or his friends. And he shouldn't have to. It isn't easy cutting ties with the people you hold dear. It's what makes us human in the first place, to want genuine connections and support the people you cherish in any way, shape, or form. If she were still preoccupied with her previous views, she wouldn't be opening up to Mahiru with her own insecurities, such as her inability to make friends, since she was previously so obsessed with being the perfect lover. She really was just like Ko, an individual who was truly isolated and just wanted to understand what it means to love. He is willing to let go of her and finally grant her wish on finding the love she's been seeking for over 1,000 years, and I think something about that is symbolic of true love. The willingness to do whatever it takes for that person, even if it means never getting to see them again and permanently setting them free from your life. And most importantly, Kiku did save Mahiru. She did manage to pull him out of the miserable life he once led, even going as far as to when he was little. Her words saved him, perhaps ones that she said for her own sake. As mentioned earlier, a portion of Mahiru's character has always been about hatred and the exhaustion it entails. But it doesn't mean that you aren't allowed to hate those that made you suffer. It just simply isn't fulfilling, and this was highlighted via Anko's character. Her dedicating a decade of her life chasing after revenge resulted in emptiness that she has wasted her entire life in such a pointless and futile quest. Not to mention, Mahiru himself had almost given into that feeling as he was tempted to kill his parents after becoming a vampire. Now, when it comes to the reasons surrounding Mahiru's death and his becoming a vampire, they are quite vague. This is merely my interpretation of things, but I do believe that perhaps Mahiru did not want to embrace the inevitable curse of having to forget Kiku when she is such an important person in his life and decided to die with her. He potentially felt as though without Kiku, he couldn't bear living for centuries. Once he had become a vampire, the letter that he wrote prior to becoming one had become a weakness to him, which led to him withering away during the day. For the first time ever, this was a decision he had come to as Mahiru Seki. He was no longer under his brother's shadow, and Mahiru decided to become a vampire and die alongside the most important person in his life, all the while showing her the view he adored most. I absolutely adore the symbolism in Haru and Kiku's final moments as they both encapsulate each other's journey. Haru's last moments emphasize her dedication to live as a human despite her inability to turn back into one, all the while acquiring the kind of love that Kiku has sought for so long. She had found genuine connection with the human and managed to completely abandon the vampiric lifestyle, even if it led to her eventual demise. In Kiku's case, she finally confirms the method of turning back into human that Haru has sought for so long, and manages to find the true love that she has been looking for this entire time, even if it may not be the kind that Haru was able to accomplish in the potential 10 years she had after quitting drinking blood. How symbolic is it that in a story titled Call of the Night, the final antagonists of the narrative alongside the protagonist's parallel die as they bask in the sun's glory while embracing the mesmerizing view that Mahiru cherishes?
世の中の恋愛なんてほとんどが勘違いや遊びだ。というのは私の勝手な言い分だ。しかしどちらにせよ確認する術などない。勘違いも貫き通せば本物だ。君は一瞬とはいえ吸血鬼になりかけた。少なくとも君が抱いた感情は嘘じゃない。
There is one final hurdle the two protagonists must face after everything they have experienced together: the state of their relationship. This is what the story has been building up to, especially through the two major antagonists that have challenged Ko's beliefs: Kiku's willingness to die for love, Seri's exhaustion as a vampire, Mahiru's death, and most importantly, the inevitable curse of love that lies within all vampires. It is all for the sake of finally giving Ko and Nazuna the opportunity to define the relationship. The story has presented multiple forms of love, and that is what makes the feeling so intriguing. It is arbitrary and has endless possibilities, for better or worse. It may simply be wanting to speak to someone for hours on end, or perhaps be a means of salvation. There is that spark within those moments that truly make them special, and this was highlighted in Kiku's moment at the movies. What relationship does Ko desire? What would be the answer that would lead to their utmost happiness? What exactly are those two? This is the arc to highlight their growth up until this point, and this is evident in Nazuna's ability to socialize with her fellow vampires in Suzushiro and Haruka. She has always been somebody who was unconcerned with others, and yet she finally starts understanding the importance of relationships, especially with how much fun she has when hanging out with Haruka, enough to label him her older brother. Her feelings for Ko add conflict in the status of their current relationship in this final stretch of the narrative, given what has been shown. While death is the answer that granted Mahiru and Kiku solace, it isn't for Nazuna and Ko. And with that in mind, it is just far too dangerous for them to hang out the way they have always been. In spite of that, the people around Nazuna do not rush her into a decision. She can keep the status quo for the time being, but she will have to face this eventually. While Nazuna is unique in being born a vampire, there just isn't enough proof to confirm that they would both be safe if she were to drink Ko's blood in her current state. She is just as lost to Ko when it comes to love. It's why she was constantly making inappropriate jokes in the first place. She didn't know what to do when it came to romance. And in a way, her love is presented to be the normal kind, one that is devoid of any malice, manipulation, or possessiveness. Her feelings are presented in a positive light, further supported in the change in her personality with the shift from friendship to romance. It is there when one will likely start worrying about the little things, as well as being flustered at actions that perhaps were not being perceived as romantic previously. Her witty remarks slowly diminish, and she becomes a lot more considerate of Ko's feelings despite never worrying over what she had said to him. The smaller moments feel special, and that is what it means to be in love. In this section of the narrative, Nazuna exhibits traits of humans, akin to that of a girl in love, almost as if to parallel her mother's story in her desire to wanting to be human, as well as likely desiring to be part of that society that she enjoys watching so much. But what separates her from Haru is that she does not want to die in the name of love. She and Ko do not want to be tied to that identity of love. It's one of the reasons why the story establishes the concept of glamour within vampires, to ask an essential question concerning the relationship. Does it only exist because of Nazuna's race, or is it because she is Nazuna Nanakusa? It is these inclusions that make the finale feel so powerful, as everything points to the answer being Ko and Nazuna's breaking free of the established identities many of these vampiric relationships ensue. She truly wants what's best for Ko, to embrace school life, and to finally move on from her. And for them to accomplish that, Nazuna must not feed on Ko and find other means of drinking blood. But it's difficult. With each passing second, it gets harder, and harder to distance herself and withstand the urge to feed on him. Vampires live off of blood, and so preventing herself from drinking his blood at all is a recipe for disaster, as seen in what had occurred with this teacher. They are forced into a situation in which they must stop hanging out with one another to prevent death, which is the complete opposite of Kiku's goals in wanting to die for love. Relationships between humans and vampires contain far too many layers for it to work, as seen in many of the cases, and the story wishes to address every angle of it. Furthermore, Ko's obliviousness makes it even tougher thanks to his insensitive remarks in relation to the possibility of Nazuna falling for him. It's a trait that Ko has had since the very beginning, his unawareness for what he says to girls that makes them fall for him. In fact, it is absolutely the sole cause of what led somebody such as Saki to fall for him, likely due to the charming way he acts and speaks. He is quite expressive with his feelings, but they are typically misinterpreted as something else, leading to such a situation. It's quite ironic given the way Ko had been presented in the beginning of the story. Despite how he has seen himself, he is dedicated, emotionally understanding, and tends to not overlook when the people around him are struggling. But it's just so disheartening, as these two are so infatuated with one another, and yet they are unable to embrace what they have been looking for this entire time. The fundamental nature of vampirism haunts them, and it's what causes Nazuna such agony. She can't be near him, or she may just break loose and feed on him unwillingly. They must figure out a way to fight the inevitability that all vampires experience. This segment of the story highlights Anko's growth perfectly. She was initially the vengeful antagonist, which later gradually changed into Nazuna and Ko wanting to support her in any way they can to find the closure that she needs, and she now intends to return the favor. She understands what it's like for a human's life to be tarnished by vampires. She's seen it for herself. If Nazuna were still around Ko's life, then perhaps it may be negatively affected by her presence. Ko has finally managed to grow accustomed to school, embracing normalcy and activities with classmates, forming new friendships, and most importantly, overcoming the mundanity that has haunted him for so long. He has what many would dream of, but this isn't the answer he had chosen for himself. While the story is clear in highlighting his growth when it comes to learning about love, and treating it with the seriousness it deserves as opposed to how he had previously viewed love, this portion of the story emphasizes on his growth from the flimsy goal of wanting excitement much earlier into the story to seeking something profound in his relationship with Nazuna. He has the opportunity to embrace this life that likely contains thrilling encounters that he was after for so long. However, it isn't going to cut it if it means losing Nazuna in the process. Without her in his life, this magnificent lifestyle would be nothing short of empty. Ultimately, it was Nazuna who managed to free him from the shackles of monotony and lead him into understanding what it truly means to feel. So, how on earth could he ditch the person he loves for this lifestyle, if the only reason he even feels this way about it is because of her in the first place? Cutting ties with vampires would simply go against everything he represents. It would stop him from being the person he's carved himself into, and it's why he decides to ditch school once again. However, it isn't derived from the frustration of emptiness. In fact, it is anything but that. He has found fulfillment in his feelings for Nazuna, but they are unfortunately nothing more than an assuredly doomed romance, and he knows this sincerely. He has seen it through Kiku as well as Seri and Akun. His feelings could never be reciprocated in the way he desires. Again, the story is quite brutal to Ko. Even he is not safe from the fated conclusion that all vampiric relationships share. They would never grow into something special as long as they embrace the love that they currently hold for one another. Becoming a vampire was never going to be the solution for these situations. It was always about confrontation, and this was done in his first return to school for the class trip, even if it wasn't initially for confronting those feelings. Only they can decide how their relationship should flourish, and what exactly he is: vampire, monster, or human. It is a decision exclusive to Ko Yamori, and that decision was to stick by Nazuna. It's why he does not let her walk out of his life without an explanation, which is what eventually leads to the long-awaited confession from the two of them. While they're aware of the unavoidable decision to never embrace these emotions, they want to savor it. They don't want to be tied to the restraints between vampire and human. They just want to love each other as Ko Yamori and Nazuna and Aksa. Perhaps things could work out if they stay as friends. Maybe they can become a couple without Ko needing to become a vampire. Where is the harm in doing so? Vampirism is irrelevant at this point. He doesn't care about the mundane. He doesn't care about the freshness the world has to offer. He doesn't care about what the future may hold for their relationship. The only thing in his mind is wanting to indulge in the feelings that he finally experienced for the first time ever. The feeling that Kiko had been seeking throughout her entire life. something that she assumed to be the sole purpose to live: love. This is just my interpretation, but I do think that based on what has been shown in Call of the Night, Ko and Nazuna have always meant to be the best representatives of humans and vampires respectively. Their character arcs and relationships serve to stand out among the many tragedies in the story as they are able to overcome each and every one of those circumstances, even if it means being unable to always be with each other. It is arguably the most important distinction between Nazuna and Ko's relationship and the many other relationships presented in the story. They refuse to lose each other out of love. They don't want it to lead to their deaths. It may have been the answer that Haru and Kiku have discovered, but it isn't the right one for Nazuna and Ko, and I think part of that is reflective of what life is all about. Everybody is different, each equipped with different questions and struggles that require different solutions that may not work for everybody. But it might for some, as shown in Mahiro and Kiku's conclusion. Rather than indulge in the love that led Mahiro and Kiku into their death, they decide to live on, even at the cost of those feelings. And I think something about that is beautiful, yet strikingly sorrowful. It's what the final outing at the beach was meant to represent, to signal their parting and to define their relationship going forward, the one that can be truly considered timeless. It's quite ironic. Mahiro originally assumed that Ko had the luxury of falling into an endless love with Nazuna without ever having to worry about death. And yet, it has only become true by letting go of that love rather than basking in it. It's extremely arduous to say goodbyes, to leave important people in your life for long periods of time, perhaps even permanently. Hell, even Mahiru, someone who was so head over heels for Kiku, was unable to do such a thing. Their feelings are just so powerful that she can't just wait a year to ensure that her feelings fade away. She loves him just that much. But it still begs the same question. What exactly is this relationship? What is the answer to all the experiences they've had over the course of the story? From the countless battles, the obstacles, and the struggles they've witnessed through this absurd connection. Their answer is a farewell, one that has Nazuna travel around the world finding temporary places to stay and acquire blood to feed off of, all for the sake of moving away from Ko until her feelings are permanently gone. But those feelings never faded, and something about that is tragic yet somewhat romantic. Remember, love is nothing more than a means of survival for vampires. They live and die by it. The feelings that start off blissful, but eventually result in misery due to the difference in lifespans. Vampires are stuck in place, forever looking the same, which is shown in the vampire Nazuna had met in her journey across the world. The story has shown how love haunts vampires time and time again, and yet, Nazuna has accepted that curse, embracing the love that will haunt her as long as it means neither of them get to die. It is a showing of how far their love for one another goes. Just as Mahiro's willingness to set Kiku free and make her dream come true highlighted his immense love for her, Nazuna and Ko's willingness to prevent themselves from indulging in those feelings, yet still manage to be so close with one another, is indicative of their feelings and just how tightly knit they have become with one another. Life is no longer mundane and horrible to go through for Ko, and he is having the time of his life working as Anko's assistant as they go about various different hijinks solving cases related to vampires, alongside living his life as a student. He doesn't intend to ever cut that connection to vampires, and he wants to cherish them. At the end of the day, he is the one that understands them best, further reflected in his hybrid form as mentioned earlier. While many may not be fond of the fact that Nazuna and Ko do not end up together, I think the way the story handles their conclusion could not be any more ideal. The ending of the story was always going to be either bittersweet or tragic. With all the factors involved, it was never going to simply be a satisfying happy ending. All routes involving Ko embracing his love for Nazuna would have led into the relationship's catastrophic end. If Ko had turned into a vampire, he would have eventually lost all his memories of his time with Nazuna, thereby losing everything that made their relationship special. And that isn't accounting for the possibility that he may die in the process due to the fact that they're both in love with each other. Not to mention, even if they were to somehow store Ko's memories by keeping samples of his blood, he still would have eventually stopped being on equal terms with Nazuna, as seen in how Sera views Akon at the end of the story. It is a relationship exclusive to nobody but Ko and Nazuna. All the relationships prior to theirs have been utilized to show the horrors and tragedies of being with a vampire, thus making their concluding answer feel all the more powerful, especially the fact that these two were able to carve out an identity through their relationship, one that has no label. It is a bond that only exists thanks to their actions carried out on a whim, both from Ko's decision to go out that night that changed the trajectory of his life, and Nazuna's decision to want to taste his emotions that was supposed to be a one-time thing that led to this relationship flourishing into what it is today. This is nothing short of the best conclusion for the relationship. It is the only way for them to be happy while still being able to hold the endearing and charming relationship that many have grown to adore from experiencing the story. For as long as Ko lives, he will always be there for her, chasing her to the ends of the earth to find her whereabouts. playing their endless game of catch. They're able to keep in touch while being on good terms despite their infrequent interactions. Plus, he has learned self-defense just to ensure that Nazuna wouldn't lose control and drink his blood in the event that she gives in to her urges, all for the sake of being able to see each other. This isn't a typical romantic relationship, nor is it a friendly one. This is a relationship unique only to Kouyamari and Nazuna Nanakusa.